So again, we are here to learn and practice meditation. And the practice of meditation is basically to develop our understanding, developing the quality of knowing.
Thank you.
Normally we know things quite a lot, and within that knowing still we know only limited things that's required for ourselves to get by. There was one time that a Buddha was living in the forest. The forest was called the Simsapa. So in that forest, he picks up some leaves from the forest and told the monks, saying that between the leaves in my hand and the leaves in the forest, which one has got more? And obviously the monks said that in the forest there are more leaves compared to the leaves that you have in your hands. Then the Buddha said that similar way, the knowledge that he gained, there is like leaves in the forest. And he taught only handful of leaves. And this handful of leaves, it is what is getting very hard to understand. And when we look at the teachings, it looks very easy to remember, but still we cannot understand. We cannot comprehend yet. And so-called a handful of leaves. Think about the amount of leaves that if we have to learn, will be terribly difficult. Just to pass the one small exam is so difficult. And this handful of leaves. So that's why the practice of a mindfulness meditation is basically to understand this handful of leaves. That how this is working and why this is happening like that. So that's why in order to understand this handful of leaves, again, according to Buddhist principles, there are two ways to do it, which normally we do. That's number one is called gathering information from other people or from the scripture. That's called a parato gosa. Normally we read the books, we listen the talks, and we gather information from visiting here and there, and like a window shopping, getting the informations about this and that. Like these days when we have to buy flight tickets, we go on so many websites like that, getting information until we find out the right one. And then we are satisfied with that. So that is called the information that we gather from others' knowledge, others' understanding, whether that is from books or listening and so on. And with that, oftentimes what happens that we become a person who holds the knowledge. So the knowledge that we have got, that we hold that knowledge, and we distill on that, investigate, and we become kind of a patent of that knowledge. So that's and we hold on to that and become a person who is a knower of it. Actually, that knowing according to Buddhist principle, is just like a philosopher getting the knowledge and ability to explain in a different forms and different ways, in whichever ways, so that whoever is listening, they can feel that, oh, this is the one who knows about it. But that's not enough yet. But at least that gives us the right understanding. At least gives us what is right and what is wrong, so that we can make a right decision. Now, the second part from that knowledge that we have received, and we got the right understanding of that, then there is another one called Yoniso Manasikara. And that is the it's a bit difficult to translate this is, but I prefer the translation called wise reflection. Sometimes it is also translated as a wise attention. And this wise reflection is that is required, so that the knowledge is not based on our perception, is not based on others' perception, and that is different to one another. But this wise reflection is something that will become common. Doesn't matter who walks on that path. Once you have rightly, wisely reflected and understand that one, then everybody will receive that. So that's why that is called the in a Buddhist term called the bhavana me panya, wisdom that gained through the practice and the ability to wisely reflect on that. And that is the knowing, and that's a pure knowing. And here again there are two types of pure knowing. Right? And this is again comes after you practice. Otherwise, it's very we won't be able to understand that one. The one knowing, we put effort to know. And this is like you want to know the breath, so you have an effort, you have a desire, you put a desire to know that, and then you're knowing that this is breath coming in and going out. And same with the feelings. You penetrate your attention there, and then that's how you recognize the feelings. Same with our mind, that what I am thinking, so we penetrate, we focus on that. So there is an intention to know, there is a desire to know. So with that, the person who is desiring to know that, so there is an entity of this existence of a self there. So that's the knowing. And here, when we are practicing, much of the time we are using that one. I want to know. That's why we have an object to pay attention to, this breath. So we try to pay attention to the breath. I'm referring to the breath because at the moment we are concentrating on the breathing meditation. So that's why we are concentrating on that's why I'm referring to the breath. So the breath becomes an object that we want to pay attention to. So there is an effort, there is a desire there. And then with that desire, we know that. And the same when we are practicing, as our mind settles, our mind becomes quiet, and then with that, what happens? Other things arises, right? The thought comes, the feelings comes, the sound distracts, and those moments, what happens? We either distracted, annoyed, or we simply ignore that. And there again, there is intention. I want. So there is intention involved there too. So with that intention, you know that object. And that knowing object is still bias. That's still a bias in that knowing. So that's still under your perception there. You want to know. And with that, because of that, your intention, it's always that goes into, you're forming into either a liking or disliking based on your desire. So that's why whenever we are meditating, whenever sometimes a thought comes, experiences comes, and then those experiences, sometimes people will be translating it into a nice one, good one, desire to want it again. And also further on will be going into the stories of this and that, goes on to tell the stories and try to link with this and link with that. That is why, that's because you are putting yourself in there. You are wanting there. That's why that knowing is not the true knowing, according to the Buddhism, okay, in the practice of meditation. Whereas the true knowing is you become observer. You have no intention at all there. Whatever arises, and you're knowing that exactly what's happening there. You simply become observer, and then watching that things is being observed objectively. Yeah? And with that, what happens that this objective observation, there is no forming, no creation, and also you are not conditioning it. You are not conditioning it. So this just comes and it just goes. And with that, what happens that our mind becomes in a state of very alert, as well as this what's called not connected. There is a gap between. It's like a gap, but not a gap. It's like you see it and then touch it, and then it just bounce back, but you still know that one, and then that simply goes off. And that's called understanding the mind matter in the practice. And that's how it comes. Even like in that moment, suppose you're watching the breath, and here the breath becomes the object that you're observing objectively, where there is no effort at all. Okay, no effort at all. You're just watching there, and as a result of that, watching this breath, what happens that it comes in a state that whether there is a breath or not. Right? And that's why when there is no breath, that breath becomes so subtle at that time. Quite often people find frightened, and then there will be a thought arises saying, should I give up my meditation and ask the teacher what's happening, or should I move myself, that whether I'm still alive? And that sort of a thought comes. Okay, so that's simply because we are still conditioning ourselves to establish somewhere something in that way. Right? Whereas when we are practicing, the more we know the true nature, what happens that it just become observer. That's there, and you become observer. And then this moment, it's just like our mind works in a way. You're turning the page, and then each page you turn, you know that an exact you know fully that page, and then you're not attached to it. You just move on, move on. And it comes, rather than looking at this page, you're coming back to look at the mind itself, who is looking the pages. And there's no intention to open the pages. It's just automatically happening. So that comes. So that's why this is the moment called observation. Become an observer. And that's why, if you remember, I normally use the simile of like sitting at the bank of the river watching the river flow. And that river flow is pure water river flowing. And nothing is involved there. And that knowing, doesn't matter who practices. Once you arrive there, then everybody will experience the same. But until then, we always have this and this and this and this. So we are still occupied by the perceptions, occupied by our feelings and so on. Okay? So the practice of a mindfulness meditation, that's why it's developing this knowing, not from the knowing that we are receiving the information and knowledge that we have collected and we have investigated on and analyzed on it. Not only that, but ability to wisely reflect and also finding from the practice. And that is, again, without any intention there, but pure knowing there. Right? And that knowing is something we have to look for. Okay? And that's we can develop by simply developing the observation of this. Okay? So with this, let's practice. Bring your attention to the moment here and now. You may spend some time observing the body sitting. Awareness of your sitting body, and relax. So in order to gain the concentration that we've been practicing, you can use the counting the breath, following the breath, fixing by having a connection with a certain points, certain area of the body, simply to gain the concentration. The mind is not distracted, quieten the mind, and with that, as you settled, in this moment, observing the breath. So I believe at this time you have developed the sign of that breath in a special place that you have decided to work on. So if not developed yet, then going back to develop, cultivate and maintaining, repeatedly doing it until the sign comes. So at this time, if you have this point of attention, whether that's the breath in your nose or in your belly, working with that. So settling and grounding yourself on it. Fixing your attention there, or fixing the breath there. And now just observing it. So this stage, our intention is to be with the breath and observing the breath, whereas due to our hindrances are still active, it is very common that mind will drift away to the other things. And when our mind drifts away to the other things, whether the sound that you hear, whether the other sensation that appears in your body, whether the thought arises at that time, simply observing that too. And here we're not spending much time with that, just leave that there and then go back to breath observing. Meanwhile, when we are observing this breath, making sure that you have a full attention on the entire breath. And here we are not following the breath, but simply standing at the designated, desired state, like the breath in your nose or in your belly, and watching the entire breath that goes in and goes out. to continue practicing.